Welcome to today's episode of the Two World Podcast. I'm your co-host Jacob, and I have with me today
and Barney,
and also a special guest that we're welcoming, and he is...
Hi, my name is Thomas Dunn.
Thank you, Thomas, for joining us. And just to give our listeners a little bit more information, would you be willing to share where you currently serve in ministry and just maybe one other detail about your background?
Yeah, sure. I am the pastor at Crown Hill Mennonite Church, which is a small rural church in Northeast Ohio. And I live in Akron, Ohio, which is about 30 minutes from Crown Hill. And happy to be here. Happy to meet you, Barney, and connect with Jacob, who I see pretty frequently.
Great.
Yeah, thanks so much. Well, we wanted to invite you on today to share a little bit about your experiences with the Akron Swahili Community Church. Our podcast really likes to explore questions of intercultural encounters and experiences and how they shape us, how they impact our faith. And I know a little bit about the story of Akron Swahili Community Church just from our own partnerships and ministry. Thomas and I are part of a 5-church partnership, and we've gotten to know these brothers and sisters in that congregation. But we wanted to invite you to come on today to share your own experiences, how you first got connected, some things that you've learned, some relationships that have formed. And so we just kind of we thought that that would be really a rich topic. And so just to get started, I wonder if you would just be willing to say a little bit about the church, who is a part of it. And after that, if you would just share a little bit about your first point of contact as you think back on it.
Yeah. So my first point of contact, I think, was 2018. So there is a social worker here working for the Refugee Resettlement Agency in Akron, who actually has a Mennonite background, who graduated from Bluffton University, was Bluffton College when he graduated. And he was born in Congo. And came here through a Mennonite program and went to college here. And so when the refugee wave started from Congo to the United States, I think that started around 15 or 16, Akron started to get a growing population of Congolese. And in that process, there were some Mennonites from Congo that were coming over. And when Rollin, the social worker, knew that they were Mennonites, he said, well, I know there are Mennonites in the area close to Akron. And so he reached out to them. He got in contact with Jacob and my regional pastor, Ralph Reinford. And so my first point of contact is when Rollin first reached out to Ralph, it was right before Ralph's sabbatical. And so then Ralph reached out to me because the church where I pastor is one of the churches closer to Akron. And he said, hey, I'm going on sabbatical. Would you be willing to try to steward this relationship while I'm gone? And so, I met with Rollin, and we met and tried to just start that relationship. And it's kind of been going, I feel like we're still starting 4 years later. But yeah, the church is made up of people that are ethnically Congolese. So what I've learned is it seems like anyone who's about 20 years old or younger has never been to Congo. And so they would have been born in camps either in Tanzania. Most of them, I think, were born in Tanzanian camps, and there's some from Uganda and some from other parts of the country. And then those 20 years old-ish and older would have been born in Congo and would have had to flee the violence that was happening. And they're mostly from the eastern part of the country, close to Rwanda, Burundi area. And so that is the makeup of the church. And so, yeah, they have been in Akron anywhere from like 5 to 6 years. The younger generation is learning English pretty well. The older generation is learning a little bit slower, as is normal, I would suspect. And yeah, over the course of that time, and I should say a unique part for this is that about a year after I initially got in touch with the church, my wife got hired to teach high school in North Akron, or Akron North High School, which is the high school in that same community in North Akron where the refugees are resettled. And so for the first year, she commuted about a half hour every day to work and back. And then we decided that if she's going to be a teacher, it'd be easier for me as a pastor to commute because my schedule is much more flexible. And so we actually moved into the same neighborhood where the church is, where my wife's school is, so she can walk to school in the morning, and now I commute into work. But that has put me much closer proximity to the Congolese, and so that's helped get to know some of the folks in the church a little bit better. So yeah, that's I'd say an overview of the last couple of years of what I know of the church this far.
Yeah, thanks so much. I appreciate that. And Barney, I'm wondering, you're hearing a lot of this for the first time. I passed on a little bit that I knew, but I wondered if anything jumps out to you from what Thomas has initially shared that you might like to have further clarification on, or that jumps out to you as something that we should reflect on a little bit more.
Yeah, I've been trying to think all day about this and maybe what I could ask or how I could kind of participate in this. And to be honest, when Jacob said that our guest today is Thomas, I didn't know the last name. And so, we were talking about the Swahili church, so I expected slightly different guests today. So some of my questions maybe would be better answered by a different person, possibly. But yeah, I'm just curious. This is kind of a really deep question, maybe. But one thought I had is maybe from a point of view of someone who's a Christian and growing up kind of in the typical majority community, and we see such a fantastic church like this that is serving such a fantastic and wonderful and great need, although it maybe seems kind of like a specific need. And it might kind of, we might kind of think, oh, well, that's great, that they're doing this, and maybe it just ends right there. But, like just that's enough of what they're doing, just serving this community. But I'm curious, does the church also have other ministries within the community that they're involved in?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I don't know that I can answer it well. I mean, I know, like, I think like their primary energy goes into kind of creating and preserving a Christian and Congolese community for their people. That's what I've seen from the outside. So a lot of emphasis on singing. They have a children's choir and a kind of a young adult choir, and they practice multiple times a week. I think there's a choir practice in the pastor's basement just about every night of the week, and then there's church on Sunday, which is a long service. So that's what I kind of see from the outside looking in. I haven't really talked to them about if they see or how they see themselves impacting the community outside the Congolese kind of refugee community that's in Akron.
Yeah, but I imagine, like you say, just the singing, their focus on that probably is recognized by maybe other groups. And I know that I've heard of times when they've visited, closer to Wayne County area and have kind of led a service or led parts of singing, and that certainly sounds amazing and like something that I could just wish I had the chance to partake in. So maybe that is for sure one of the things that they're doing. But
yeah. One other point of connection that I would like to mention to you both is that Roland Mukanza, the person Thomas had identified as reaching out initially to our regional pastor, is the same person, Barney, that you and Kai met when we went to visit that relief agency. I don't know if you had made that connection.
Right.
Okay, you had. All right. And so that was so fascinating because Barney had been serving as a host for the son of the pastor of a church in Japan, who's our sister church congregation with Worcester Mennonite, and he is studying social work. And in Japan, there if I understand correctly, is less of a prevalence of refugees. There's less of a governmental, I don't know, say resettlement emphasis or program in place. So they just have fewer refugees. So it was very unique for Kai to come in here, Roland, talk about what's happening in Akron with refugees. And it seemed like it was really impactful. And so it seems like there's some real connections here in terms of Kai, the son of a Christian pastor in a culture where he's a minority, right, is learning about these Congolese who are coming into American culture where they're a minority, and he's hearing about how they're being ministered to, and then he's going back to his own country with these lessons. And I guess I'm kind of wondering, for both of you, as we talk about this, and maybe I'll start with you, Thomas, how just being around people who are not in the majority of the culture may give you new insights or understanding as to what it's like, the struggles that they may face or the challenges. Or I just am wondering how maybe this experience of connecting with them has impacted your awareness of the plight of a refugee or somebody who comes in a minority position.
Yeah, I mean, just kind of after every time I sit down and meet with them, and whether it's one of the pastors or the younger folks that are in the choir that can speak English from me, I just kind of walk away just thinking like wow, like this is my life has been so easy. Like everything has been prepared for me, and it's just kind of like overwhelming when I think about what their day to day is. So the younger folks are usually either in school or they're working factory jobs, and then they are supporting their families, and then they have this huge commitment to church, and so their days are very long, and what with going to church after the factory job and things about that. So it's just the kind of like seeing upfront and personal, like the difficulty of life, that without kind of all the creature comforts and things that come with generational wealth of having, my family immigrated probably 200 years ago, and like kind of all those difficulties are now behind us. That's not to say that, people that have been here in the country for a long time don't have any difficulties, but it's just a very different approach. But also in the midst of that, you kind of see I can see the stories that I've heard of our community, the Mennonite community, of those real strong internal relationships, because there is that reliance on each other. Like that's how they survive. That's how they've come to be able. That's how they are surviving here in this place. They're relying on each other. Their church is like a family. They help each other in all sorts of different ways that I think is probably typical of first generation immigrants or refugees. That was probably typical of the Mennonite community a couple hundred years ago when we immigrated from Switzerland. There's like either we rely on each other or we don't survive. But now, in 2021, we are all, most of us, capable of financially being, on our own, and we don't quote unquote need the church anymore. And so those relationships are less reliant. So yeah, it's overwhelming to kind of think about all that and see unfolding what first generation immigrants are living through, and how that's helping their relationships, and how it's going for them.
Yeah. One of the things that has been so meaningful, I think, is to observe the events where our congregations have gotten together with our brothers and sisters there in Akron and worshiped and appreciated the different styles of music and way of worshiping. And I guess I'm just kind of wondering what it's been like for you to see maybe a congregation primarily located in a rural setting, having relationship and rubbing shoulders with people from halfway across the world who they would never normally encounter. And I guess maybe it's hard to speculate what impact that has on them, but maybe just you observing that, what impact it has on you, knowing that you've been a part of hosting and bringing these groups together that would normally never talk. I just kind of wonder what your own sense of how fulfilling that might be, or what it feels like to be a part of that process of bringing these groups together.
Yeah. Um, yeah, as far as those combined services that we've had as multiple churches coming together, we've probably done that once, about 3 times now, maybe 4 times. Like those have probably been like the highlight of my ministry career total of all the years I've been, like just like those Sunday mornings of seeing the different language groups, the different generations of immigrants. We have Hispanic groups that are also kind of first generation and second generation immigrants, and then the Congolese are all first generation, and then us as rural Mennonites are probably sixth, seventh, eighth generation. And so, like those have just been, the highlight of my career. I wonder though, as far as talking about the relationships, like I don't think we've got past the novelty stage yet. Like you kind of look at those worship services and like, this is a beautiful thing and it's great. But, if you think of like the trajectory of culture shock or going through cultures, I was just reading about this the other day, there's kind of that wave, like you get on that initial high, like everything's beautiful, everything's awesome. I love this new place. I love the smells and the food. And then at some point you have the dip, like everything's foreign and I don't feel comfortable. I don't know, and so I don't think we've got to that point where relationally we start to actually really started to have relationship depth to get past the novelty. So does that make sense?
That's good. Yeah, that does. And it makes me think that this type of opportunity to build this type of partnership shouldn't be viewed as a quick, easy process, but it takes sustained focus, a long view, most likely a lot of effort, because intercultural relationships and partnerships just take all that extra effort in communication and working through difference. But it feels to me, just hearing you talk about it, like there's a richness there too. Like it takes extra work, but it's rewarding and meaningful. Like there's a lot to it that's so transformative. And Barney, I'm kind of wondering from the standpoint of what Thomas was sharing about culture and culture shock and forming authentic relationships. Now, I know you've been in Japan a number of years, and that's a different context than what we're talking about, but the journey could have some similarities of learning a host culture where you're living and learning to form relationships there. And what would you say about that process? Do you think it takes time, years even, or as we think about forming these relationships with our Congolese brothers and sisters, maybe we can glean something from your experience in Japan of forming friendships?
Yeah. It's interesting, especially here when I decided to attend the Baptist church here, and even my impressions or ideas of what a Baptist church might be were so different. So I thought that there was something that maybe, although I'd never been to a Baptist church in America, I thought that maybe there was at least some kind of background that I had in mind that I could kind of connect with. Kind of like as some kind of foundation. And then even that was different than what I expected. But thankfully that was different in a positive way. And that is because of, again, getting kind of to maybe this theme that we're developing of music. And there are a lot of shared hymns that we sing in the church here. And I think that gave me something to hang on to, something that I could feel some kind of belonging, some kind of connection, and through some kind of that I could maybe add my, literally add my voice to the service and find a way to be a part of it. I think that's probably the hardest thing. In my time in Thailand, I went to a Thai church. And in that case, I could speak and understand the language, but the music was different from what I was used to. They were usually hymns and sung kind of in 4 parts as well, but I was unfamiliar with all of the hymns. And I actually found it a little bit harder to connect with my experience of going to church there than what I have now. I mean, it could be just the cultural differences, or it could be even my age at the time. And I'm curious, it's nice in the blue hymnal that we have, there are some hymns from different traditions and different churches, regions in Africa that we sing. And I know in MCC, getting ready to go to volunteer, we actually sang quite a few of those. And it was wonderful to hear. I wonder if, in your experiences visiting the church, or the Swahili church, or the Swahili church visiting your churches, have they sung hymns that we also, that are familiar to us as well?
I haven't heard that yet with this church. We haven't really found that musical commonality yet. I know it's different. We have another colleague at Orville Mennonite, Bill Seymour, and they have a sister church in Tanzania. And he said that church certainly has that experience where they have a hymn book, and it's basically all the same hymns that we sing, but in Swahili. And so he kind of had that experience where you had, where they went over there and they were singing the same songs. It was a beautiful thing. Yeah. And in this church, it's not. I mean, Bill's talking about this with us at length too. I mean, part of that is a kind of a unhealthy legacy as well, because that means the missionaries went in and said, this is how Christians sing. And so it's kind of refreshing that this Congolese group hasn't had that. I mean, their music doesn't reflect white Western themes at all that I'm aware of. I guess I don't know the whole history of the music that they're singing, but no, I've yet to hear anything that's a familiar Western hymn.
We have had at some of our gatherings attempts to make each participating church's music accessible to the others. So we've had song sheets with parallel translations of all the text, or starting a song, How Great Thou Art, in Spanish, and then going to Swahili, then to English, or things like that have through music tried to bridge the experiences of the different churches. And I know one year we had for the opening some musicians from Worcester Mennonite, and they played a song that had Swahili in it. And I asked some of the folks from the Akron Swahili Community Church, what did you think of that? And they said, oh yeah, we actually were familiar with that one. I'm trying to remember. Akuna Mungu Kama Wewe, I think is what the song is called. But in our hymnal, I was searching for Swahili songs. I think there might be some Swahili text. I know one of the songs that we thought about using, but it's not in Swahili, is Somlandela, I think is what it is. But I think that's different. Is that South African? Do you remember, Thomas?
Yeah, I feel like we found like there's a number of popular South African songs that have made their way to our circles. But yeah, when we looked into them, it didn't seem like there was any Swahili or that kind of Eastern African influence in them.
But it is fascinating that even if the text or the melody is not the same, sometimes the experience of watching one another's music groups sing, the one group can see in the other's group the same worshipful spirit, and that is unitive. Like, I think like the energy of the worship in Spanish from Salem has its own unique dynamism that the folks at Akron Swahili Community Church appreciate. And then one time Tim Shu from Central Christian had a choir sing, and I think they liked that. And we've had a community choir. So there's music is still uniting us, even if it's not always with the same hymn. That's interesting.
Yeah, I agree with that. I've heard the same feedback.
Yeah. Well, I'm kind of wondering too about the idea. I would like to hear a little bit more about the idea of moving to Akron, because I know they say, the idea of the incarnation, and one way of looking at it is Jesus taking up residence in our neighborhood. I think that's how Eugene Peterson translates John chapter 1 in the Message, that he took up on flesh and moved into the neighborhood. And you move to the neighborhood. That's a very incarnational thing to do. If you follow that line of thinking, a very missional thing to do. And I'm kind of wondering, if you thought of it that way, or if it, I guess I'm kind of wondering how maybe this journey has connected with some of the themes of your faith, or connected with some of the ideas or the theology of what you believe, some core scriptural truths. Has it connected in any way that is kind of bubbled up to surface? You can say, I can see that at work, or a connection there happening.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to say that, like, yes, like this was, we moved to Akron because this was our understanding of what God was calling us to do. But I mean, in reality, it was just a much more practical decision. But I do fully believe that God's hand was working in that. I mean, Katrina applied to probably dozens of schools in the Wayne County area, and I may be a bit biased, but I think she's more qualified, or as qualified, as any person in that county. But she didn't get any job. And then the process of coming to Akron, there's 7 public high schools here in the Akron public school system. And when she got interviewed, they interviewed her as a teacher, not for a specific school. And then when they called her back, she said, "We want to offer you a job at North." And that was while I was, getting to. So, I mean, certainly I see God's hand at work in all this, but not necessarily my plan to, like, I'm going to be an incarnational person, so this is what I'm going to do. So I can't take credit for that. Yeah, so
right,
it's good to sit back and see how God's been at work, not while on our part it seems more accidental or practical.
I see what you're saying, and I think it's almost more meaningful that it wasn't like some intentional plan, that it kind of emerged almost as a surprise. Like, it became possible in a way you never would have thought or could have planned or predicted. So that's beautiful to me. What about maybe as you think about like kind of some core beliefs about, like, I'm just gonna share from my own experience, like the dignity of all people, how God created each person with his image, and they all have dignity and worth, or God's desire to welcome the guest in the land, the refugee or the immigrant, because we see it all throughout the Old Testament. God has a special place in his heart for those who are weak and don't have power, or those who are coming into a situation they don't have a support network. And I'm kind of wondering if maybe this experience has made some of those themes more real to you. Is that, what do you come away feeling like? I guess my question is, are you sensing that it's impacting your faith or what you believe in some ways?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I guess for all those things you said, like, I've been taught and understood and discussed with you and others, like how that is the central tenets of faith, right? That this is what we're called to do. And I would say the experience of the last couple of years working with this group just kind of recognize, like, for me, has been like, those are great tenets to hold, but they're very difficult to live out. Like, so you talked about, like, welcoming the stranger and looking out for the marginalized and the power imbalance. But, like, when it comes right down to it, as a person who's a white man living in North America, who's born and raised here, knows the language, knows the culture, like what is the healthy way to help and to empower and to not to get past the novelty and to build those authentic relationships? Like, that's all hard to do. And then, I mean, and Jacob, you've experienced this too, I know, because when we met with some of the pastors the other day, they kind of opened the time and they said, "We see you guys as the local Mennonites in this area, and Jacob and Thomas as represented them. Like, we see you as our spiritual fathers, and we're the spiritual children." And both Jacob, you and I both talked about that. Like, what? Like, no, like, that's not how we want this relationship to be. We would like to see ourselves as siblings, and we would like to walk with you as equals on this journey. But yeah, how do you work within that context? How do I help without seeing myself as the white savior? How do a bunch of wealthy Mennonites living a half hour from Akron bless these people? Like, should we be fundraising to buy them a church? Should we be buying them a van because we have more money than them and we can do that? But at the same point, is that the way to do it? Is money the primary way? But at the same time, God has called us to be generous with our money. So all these things,
Yeah.
like when the rubber meets the road of kind of working, like trying to be what all those things you talked about, of being aware of power imbalance, welcoming the stranger, and then actually doing it. I haven't found the sweet spot of the way to do that yet.
As you're talking about this, something just dawned on me for the first time. And I feel like it's making me emotional here thinking about it, is that I think this connection, did you say is like over 3 years old, 3 or 4, something like that?
Yeah, I think it was the fall of 18.
Yeah. And we're still, like you said, scratching the surface. There's still so much more depth that we hope to plumb and to enter into. But I feel like it just dawned on me that maybe part of the calling is to not give up, even though the questions are so complicated and hard and it's difficult to discern. After 4 years of doing anything, you can get burnt out or discouraged or feel like that we're just not making headway. Let's change things or move on. But like maybe part of our calling in this specific situation is to keep working at it and keep trying to discern, keep going back and trying to ask those questions and hearing from our Congolese partners what they need and what they understand and praying about it. It just seems like that's part of the equation, is the willingness to be there, even though it's hard, and keep trying. But Barney, I'm wondering what you're hearing as you heard Thomas share that. Did anything jump out to you?
Yeah, I think back to at the beginning, maybe near the beginning of today's talk, when he made a point that I hadn't thought about, of that it's really easy to view the relationship so far as novel. And yeah, it makes sense that really is probably the way it still seems at times, because when you have these kind of get-togethers, and it's an exceptional thing that happens, and so of course it still feels very novel. And how is it that you can, get past that stage? And because we do have the common link of being Mennonites and part of the Mennonite Church and part of the maybe Ohio Conference, if that's right, I don't know, but there's so much more depth that is there in a way. And it's just hard, especially not just in terms of culture that's different, but even, the Wayne County is a much different area than Summit County, right? And our everyday lives are so much different. And being able to find some commonality, or maybe just through more increased sharing of experiences, or getting together more often, and how, what relationships or what directions might come from there, and those experiences too. But it's definitely not, there's no, exactly what Thomas was saying earlier, there's no quick solution, and what Jacob was saying too, that it takes time. And even kind of referencing the sister church relationship that Yachu has with Worcester Mennonite, it's not something that you can expect to happen so quickly. And I felt at times that, is it going anywhere? Is it stalled? And maybe, but at times, but then when I think that, or start to think that, it picks up again. Yeah. And again, seeing God,
so true,
with our plans for us and these relationships. I don't think that these ever get started just to stall out, but with the long view, with being able to take a step back sometimes, that we see, new ideas and new directions, and eventually we see things going in a different way, or being really fruitful. And I just really hope for that with maybe not necessarily with the churches in Wayne County, but maybe with the other churches in the area, however it is. But for one way or the other, we're all much more blessed that this community is in the Akron area, and we've been able to know them at least a little.
Yeah, those are really good points, Barney. And I'm kind of wondering, Thomas, as we're kind of drawing things to a close, do you think about this idea of maybe the journey is to get to that depth is going to be longer? And as we look ahead, there are a lot of uncertain questions, but there's something about it that's so special and unique. Like you said, one of the greatest ministry experiences that you've been able to have so far. And so as you kind of draw things to a close, maybe I wonder if you would just be willing to say a hope that you might have for the relationship. If we don't know the future, but something you would love to see emerge if possible.
Yeah. So I was thinking, I wasn't sure where to share this, so I'll share this in the closing at least. So I just did a funeral for a man from Crown Hill a couple of months ago, and it was over a year ago, and he was in his 90s, one of the most faithful servants that I've seen. And he came to the first couple of combined worship services we had, and afterwards he wrote me a note just saying how much he loved that, and he said, like, I wonder if this is the future of Crown Hill.
Wow.
And that's always stuck with me, because yeah, like, that's a man who's committed his life to the church in North America, to that small church in Crown Hill. But he knew that for that church to exist for another 100 years, we couldn't keep doing the same thing. And so I think that's kind of like when we can all get to that point, and when can I get to that point of, like, I'm not, like, my primary calling isn't necessarily to help these people, right? It's like this is the church, and this is the future of the church. And so, yeah, me being an assistant, like, help however I'm called to help, but ultimately this is a two-way street, that they are here to show us the future of the church, and we're here to show them the future of the church. And until that mutuality is achieved, that's a long journey, like you said, Jacob. And when we get there, I don't know. But like this is a church. Like, if we're going to exist 50 years from now, and people come to Northeast Ohio and they want to see churches, little rural white Mennonite churches aren't going to be here. The question is, will there be multicultural, multiracial, multilingual churches that have grown out of what we're here, and will they be here? Because that's the future of the church, not what we've experienced now. I mean, what we've experienced now has brought us to this point, but I don't think it will take us to where God wants us to go.
Thank you so much for sharing, Thomas. And Barney, thank you for your help today. I want to hand it over to you, if you would, to do our closing.
Yeah, sure. It really has been a great pleasure of mine being able to sit down today with Thomas and of course Jacob. And it's just been such a fantastic experience for myself, having one point of view, some expectations coming into today, and then really seeing the direction of today's talk go in a different way. And maybe coming away from myself personally, that we can see all of the small ways and the big ways that God is working in our lives, and the way God is still directing things, and seeing that it takes patience in our part, and it takes careful listening, and of course it takes action at times as well. We really thank all of the listeners and the viewers out there. We always appreciate you being able to kind of sit in on this chat with us, and we hope that it has given you pause, and maybe things that have touched your heart in a way and directed your thinking from now on. And as always, we look forward to doing the next episode, and look forward to having you along with us then. We will definitely see you again soon.